Well, folks, Vice President J.D. Vance is heading to Greenland this Friday with his wife. Now, officially, it's to see a dog sled race, but we all know this is a political trip. President Trump has been eyeing a territorial expansion. He's talked about Canada. He's talked about Greenland. Greenland is his next target right now, and it really has a lot to do with dominating the Arctic Circle. That a lot of it has to do with that national security, international security. We're going to dive into it all for you today. But before we do, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and make sure that you never miss another video from us again in the future. So we know Greenland has about 836,000 square miles that sit atop the Arctic Circle, with just a population roughly of about 57,000 people. It's like Alaska has about 54,000 miles of coastline, but it's isolated. Russia controls about 24,000 miles of the Arctic coast, which is half the region's total. And the Northern Fleet bases 80% of their nuclear subs there in Russia. We know that this is very strategic for not only international security, for the United States national security, for security of the waterways when it comes to shipping and trade. And if there were to be an attack by China, by Russia, this is where they're going to come through. China has been very much trying to get involved in the Arctic Circle. China's Belt and Road Initiative targeted Greenland back in 2018. It offered them $500 million to refurbish airports and to buy an abandoned naval base. Obviously, this was blocked by Denmark, citing national security reasons, and the Arctic shippings exploded. With the Northwest Passage, traffic is up almost 40% since 2012 per Canada's Coast Guard, which cuts Asia-Europe shipping by roughly 4,000 miles. And Trump wants to control it, and I don't blame him. Trump wants to have more control of the Arctic Ocean. This is all we have right now, or the Arctic Ocean, the Arctic Circle. This is what the United States has right here, this little tip. And now, granted, if we were in a time of war with Russia or China, I guarantee you Canada would be very friendly with us and allow us to use, I believe this is part of Nunavut, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but. And then you have Greenland, which is owned by Denmark, which has a huge amount of land that is inside of the Arctic Circle. You also have Norway has a little bit of land in here. More Norway, Sweden, Finland, and then I believe this is all Russia right here. Russia. And, we know that Trump wants to control the Arctic. They've said nations that threaten Greenland's waterways risking America and Canada and global stability. Here's the reality. The Arctic ice is melting, which is opening up trade routes and resources. It's like we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars of minerals that are being unearthed because the ice caps are melting. They're literally losing ground, which is now going to expose natural resources, rare earth minerals, trillions of dollars. And, Vance is going to join his wife on this scheduled visit with U.S. diplomats. They are going to tour the Air Force and Space Force base that was established in Greenland in 1943. Let's see. The Biduvik Space Base, which is a U.S.-operated installation in northwestern Greenland and is one of the most strategically important military sites in the world, even though most Americans have never heard of it. According to a Danish defense analyst, it is, quote, quite literally the outermost eye of American defense. Biduvik is where the U.S. can detect a launch, calculate the trajectory, and activate its missile defense system. It is irreplaceable. The outgoing post is getting new attention as President Trump, who has vowed to make Greenland a part of the United States, sends a high-level delegation to the island this week. The visitors will include J.D. Vance, who said on Tuesday that he intends to visit, quote, our guardians in the Space Force while there. Now, roughly there's about 150 U.S. Air Force and Space Force personnel on the ground that are permanently stationed there. They handle missile defense and space surveillance and the upgraded early warning radar detection, which can detect ballistic missiles in the earliest moments of flight. We know that if Russia is going to shoot a ballistic missile at us, it is going to most likely come over the Arctic Ocean. We know that Greenland is very vital for national security, as it is right now with the Air Force base that we have there, to detect these ballistic missiles. And that is why it's so pivotal that we have more control in the Arctic Ocean. I 100, there was, in the early years of America, there was this idea of American expansionism that it was called Manifest Destiny. It was really the concept that American was exceptional, that our American exceptionalism is and should occupy a special place in the world, and it should cover the North American territory, and that they should move westward. We were in the colonies on the east side, and we should move westward. Now I think we move northward, if I'm being 100% serious with you. We need to make sure that we have this for national security. Greenland's government right now, though, has called it completely inappropriate that they're pushing, inappropriate for what the U.S. is doing, which is kind of ridiculous because Greenland right now is pushing for independence from Denmark by like 2026, 2027. And Trump said yesterday that, quote, they invited us, which was flagged by some people saying no invite exists. But the reality is that Greenland and Danish archives show that Greenland has sought investment from the United States going back as far as the first Trump administration. The Trump administration sees this as diplomacy, not an intrusion. And Vance's goal is to assess the security and pitch the U.S. benefits. The reality is that Greenland is owned by Denmark. There's radical anti-Trump European propaganda pushed on this population in Greenland. We need to have our own American propaganda that's being pushed there. We need to make sure that they know what are the benefits America can offer. We can offer way more than Europe can offer. We can offer in the ability to get that, what country right now is set up to lay the investment, put out the infrastructure to be able to access a lot of these minerals that are under the ice. The United States is uniquely positioned, and we could make their country very wealthy. I could see them being like a territory, make them very, very wealthy under this agreement. Because Greenland's economy right now is about $3 billion in GDP, which 80% of it was from fishing. This is not a very modern economy that you have here. And Denmark sends $600 or $700 million a year, which is half of Greenland's budget, to Greenland. And the infrastructure there is in dire need of an investment. Dire need. 90% of roads there are unpaved. They don't have railways. And per Greenland's stats office, during independence, they would lose subsidies, sinking their GDP overnight by like 20 or 30% by Danish estimates. I believe that the U.S. could go in, offer $5 or $10 billion in an initial investment, focus on roads, ports, mining, infrastructure. The Greenland coast holds, 35 to 40 million tons of rare earth minerals, which we believe is somewhere 10 to 20% of the global reserves of all rare earth minerals, which is worth upwards of $7, $8, $9 trillion. Mining jobs could triple employment from, 1,600 to 4,500 to 5,000. Military bases that could be put there to deter Russia's 35 Arctic outposts and China's moves. Denmark's GDP is about $400 billion, and that cannot match with the United States of our $26 trillion in GDP that we have here. Totally dwarfs Denmark. And the EU's anti-Trump stance sways Greenland polls when you have 70% that are opposed to annexation. But we need to show them our plan. What can we do for Greenland? That's really what it's all about here. What can we do for Greenland? We can bring an economic lifeline plus NATO-grade protection. Denmark is not going to be able to protect you the way the United States could protect you. They're not going to be able to make your country wealthy, filthy rich the way the United States could make you filthy rich. We can revitalize the entire economy in Denmark. We can turn, it's like the things that we could do with Denmark, and really a lot of it too has to do not only with deterring China from, they want to invest in Greenland, but to decouple our reliance on China. That is a huge part of what Donald Trump is trying to do. He is trying to decouple our economy with China. China is racing to the bottom of the barrel. Why is it that China is so competitive on the world market? Number one, because the world has agreed since the 80s that we were going to tip the scales in favor of China. We thought that if we tip the scales in to China, we would ship manufacturing jobs there, but then we'd also be able to ship Western values to China. Well, what's happened? The exact opposite. We've shipped manufacturing jobs to China, while China has shipped their radical communist propaganda to the United States and the rest of the world. We need to cut China off from the world economy. That's what needs to happen. China abuses their workers. They abuse the citizens of China. They're in violation of more human rights violations than you could probably count. We need to cut them off from the world economy now, and we need to start to decouple now. We need to reshore manufacturing in the United States for national security purposes. Doesn't mean we need to manufacture everything here. We just need to be able to have the capacity within 90 days to ramp up production to that. Yeah, look at the pharmaceutical industry, steel and aluminum industry, the automotive industry, the oil industry, oil refining, oil like actual fracking. We need to shore up these industries. Make sure that the United States is not going to rely on China or India for this. We're not going to rely on Taiwan for our chips. That's another big, we need to shore chip manufacturing here in the United States. It'll bring good quality, high paying jobs to the United States, and it will make us less reliant on China. That is the reality here. And, critics are going to say that this is imperialism and it's fascism. Okay, you dumb fucks. History disagrees with you. The United States has done it multiple times. The United States bought Alaska for roughly like $8 million back in the 1800s from Russia, which now gives us hundreds of billions of dollars in resources. Greenland's takeover would be no takeover, and it would be no different. It would be a deal. Denmark sold the U.S. Virgin Islands to us in 1917 for $20 or $30 million. So precedent exists to take over land masses in a deal, an economic deal, not a hostile takeover. And Denmark may have worries about healthcare, where Denmark spends $4,000 per person in Greenland yearly. The U.S. could cover the 57,000 people in Greenland with like $250 million to offset. It's like you could totally get that from the profits we would get from minerals. That'd be like the first week of profits from mineral extraction. We could pay for years of healthcare coverage for the people in Denmark. And, critics want to ignore the fact that Russia's 2023 Arctic drills, 50 ships strong, or China's cobalt monopoly in the Congo, which they control 90% of the global supply. We need leverage over China and Russia. We need to be able to get these rare earth minerals. We need to be able to cut China off from the world economy and not be reliant on them. Greenland is vulnerable right now. They're trying to get independence from Denmark, but the reality is if they get independence from Denmark, they're going to collapse. They are going to collapse. Their economy will collapse. And the U.S. is going to need to step in where Denmark fails. But really what we need to do, we need to go there and we need to pitch this to the Greenland people. The people who live in Greenland, we need to counter this anti-Trump European propaganda bullshit. We need to go in there and we need to tell them this is what we can do for your country. We can make you wealthy. You'll be one of the most wealthiest nations on the planet. You will be a part of the largest economic powerhouse in history. But the thing is we have to have a bigger vision too. Greenland is just one step. Then you also have to look at the Canadian territories of Nunavut, Yukon, the Northwest territories. Holy shit. That span millions and millions of square miles with a population of like a little over 100,000. Combine that with Greenland, and the U.S. could control up to 40% of the Arctic coast, which would rival Russia, where they control roughly like 45 to 50% of the Arctic coast. Look at the map. Look at the map here. You can go from Alaska all the way over to Canada here, which could become the 51st state if we're lucky, plus Greenland. It's like this, what we would own. It's like you map it. Alaska to Greenland Sea, the Davis Strait. This is half of the Northwest Passage here. You want to talk about mineral resources. Get it not reliant on China. Canada's Nunavut province, or I think it's a province, has $2, $3, $4 trillion just in untapped nickel and copper. Your total haul, if you're looking at Greenland as a whole, you could be looking at tens of trillions of dollars in rare earth minerals and oil that's in the ground there. Then talk about the military edge. We could set up dozens of new bases in Greenland. Citing, Russia's Arctic response time by like 30%. We could increase our ability to counter Russia by like 30%. And here's the thing, funding is said, you can look at many different things, but the resources that we could get from the ground in Greenland, in Canada, we could make billions and billions and billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars in profit from Greenland, from Canada. If we took them over, we could use it not only for military strategicness, but also to stop being reliant on China, stop being reliant on Taiwan and the Congo for our rare earth minerals. And then if we took in Canada, there wouldn't be a tariff on Canadian products. It would lower energy cost. Now, obviously, Canada, that's a little more far-fetched. I think Greenland, the reality of it is much more, I think there's a much bigger reality that it could happen versus Canada. I think Canada would be very, very tough. I don't think it's very likely it's going to happen, but I think Greenland could 100% be something that happens. Especially with the fact, it's not like Greenland is not trying to leave Denmark. Like, they're trying to get their independence from Denmark. They're going to need economic partnerships with other countries. And even if it's just we enter into an economic partnership where they get protection from the United States and they become a territory, and then write them a check for $50 billion. And then let's just go in there and let's make them filthy rich. Let's make their economy rich. Let's give them so much money from the profit we're going to make from all of these rare earth minerals. Because the reality is Greenland would have to be a territory, not a state. The population is too small there. There's only like 55, 60,000 people who live in Greenland. And, you want to talk about Canada. This is my issue with Canada. Canada, they rely on the United States. Canada does not spend enough money per GDP as a percentage of their GDP as they should be. They should be spending way more money. They rely on the fact that the United States will swoop in and protect them if something happens. That's what Canada relies on. And that's why, if Canada just wants to lean on the United States for national security protection, for international security protection, and then rip off our farmers here, I think unless there's a specific, this is my issue that I have. Trump just says Canada needs to do more to do with immigration, or they need to become the 51st state. I feel like there needs to be more detailed plans out in the public. Canada, you need to increase your defense budget to 3% of GDP. Or we're going to tariff your economy. This is there needs to be clear. I'm okay using tariffs as leverage. But what Trump is doing with Canada, I don't feel like there are clear enough metrics that Canada needs to hit. Maybe behind the scenes there are, but to the American people, we don't see that. So we need to see what that is. Otherwise, we need to take over Canada. And, and I think Alberta, especially if the Liberals win this next election in Canada, I definitely think that we could see Saskatchewan and Alberta really looking to leave Canada within a couple years and become part of the United States, which would be huge. These are oil-rich countries. They have tons of minerals and liquid gold below their feet. It's like it would explode the economy. We would unleash energy independence. It's like this is what's so sad about Canada is you have Alberta and Saskatchewan that subsidizes the rest of Canada, while the rest of Canada turns around and tries to choke out the economy of Alberta because it's oil and gas based. So it's like they literally, these people are so stupid in Canada that they're literally trying to bite the hand that feeds them. But it's Canada. Not really surprised by something like that. But this trip for J.D. Vance is a test on Greenland's appetite. Obviously, he's going to the military base there, but he's also going to pitch the economic rescue that the United States and the economic proposals that we could bring to Greenland. And I think this could be a huge part of Trump's legacy, securing the Arctic Circle and breaking China's grip on minerals and a huge grip on economic resources, rare earth minerals throughout the world. We need to be able to match Russia's reach. We do. We need to be able to have better national security. Not only is this going to help our national security. This is international security. We're going to be able to secure trade-in routes, shipping routes that are in the Arctic much better than Canada or Greenland would be able to. Because the reality is Russia will not stop. They're going to continue to move forward. China is going to continue to move forward, investing trillions of dollars in their Belt and Road Initiative globally. The U.S. needs to follow suit. We need to expand our reach beyond the United States. Now, granted, and I think a lot of that goes through USAID, but here's the thing about USAID. We're not going to fund LGBTQ-centered theatric plays in the Congo. That's not going to happen. No. We're not going to fund woke liberal DEI bullshit. If we're going to have our own version of the Belt and Road Initiative to expand our reach and our, well, how would you say, our influence in these other countries, we need to do it through big structural changes, infrastructure, economic support, trade-in relations. That's what we need to do, not by DEI bullcrap. I think USAID is something that we can use strategically going forward to build out relations with other countries. But we're not going to do it by funding DEI woke bullcrap. We're not. Just not going to happen. So that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Do you think Greenland actually has a chance to get annexed? The talks are heating up. We will catch you next time, folks. Hit that subscribe button as always.